broadcasting from the Unshackled studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello everyone and welcome back to a new WilmsFront featured interview show on this Sunday, the 8th of October, 2023. We are broadcasting live on the WilmsFront YouTube, Odyssey and Rumble channels. It is 7 p.m. here in Melbourne, Victoria. Starting a little early tonight, we're in the grand finale week of the Australian Aboriginal Voice Referendum campaign, with referendum day next Saturday on October the 14th. The polls all point to an overwhelming no vote in possibly all states apart from Tasmania. This turnaround has been largely in credit to the official no campaign led by Jacinta Price, the Northern Territory Senator and Country Liberal Party from the Country Liberal Party, who is also the Shadow Indigenous Affairs spokeswoman, and Warren Mundine, former Labor Party president. And obviously, they have shattered the narrative that the Aboriginal voice is what Aboriginal people both have asked for and need or want. Another prominent no campaigner and a friend of both Jacinta and Warren is Dr. Anthony Dillon, a Honorary Fellow at the Australian Catholic University, and also the author of, the editor, one of the co-editors of this book in Black and White, Australia at the Crossroads, which was published 10 years ago by Connor Court Publishing. And it's actually signed by Anthony, if I open it up to here. And even though it's a 10-year-old book, the solutions still, they haven't been implemented to closing the gap. And so, Anthony, thank you for joining back on WilmsFront.
Good to be back. Thank you.
And as we're going to air right now, Channel 7 has got the voice singing competition grand finale. And there, even though you and I
didn't know I was going to be asked to sing, but shall we leave that for another time?
I know that Jacinta Price can sing. She was a musician before she became politically active. But even though you and I have, we have consumed most of the media commentary on this voice referendum, there's still a lot of people who have only know that there's a referendum on, and they have, when they're asked about the voice, that they say, is that the singing competition?
Yeah. I mean, it shows that, yes, we're consumed about it, but there's a lot of people out there, it doesn't seem to be on their radar.
No. And as the polls have shown, people, the Yes campaign, and we're going to get into how poor a job they've done, they've clearly not really read the mood of the Australian people who are focused on these other day-to-day issues. And they've heard from Warren and Jacinta and yourself. I'm not sure if you created this meme here, so not his voice, which is you, not her voice. Jacinta Price's breast, Price's mother, and then it's got Jacinta Price here and Warren Mundine. I know that you shared it, but when the polls were pointing to a overwhelming majority yes vote, it was before a lot of Australians had heard of U4, the awesome foursome. And so now that they have heard that this is Anthony Albanese, the narrative that he's put forward, what is it? It's a gracious, modest request. It's all about respect. A lot of Australians have taken a double take.
Yes, that's certainly been the case. And he's still beating that same drum, and just recently I heard him talk about, this is our chance to unite Australia. And I want to hear if it's going to unite Australia, exactly how it's going to do it. Don't just make these grand claims, but give us some detail.
Well, it all obviously this voice proposal, it stemmed from the Uluru Statement of from the Heart in 2017, which is, well, Anthony Albanese told us it's just one page, and he said he hasn't read the other 26. Well, it's the summary of the dialogues, the 26 pages, and the 112 is the minutes from the Uluru dialogues, but it can basically, the way that I've read them is that it still sees Australia through the lens of a black and white Australia. That it's still the white Australia, even though Australia is very multicultural and multi-ethnic now, is still oppressing the black. And it's when we're talking about the Aboriginal people, isn't it? Without the C, it's BLAK. So it's still seeing this as basically a continuing, you could call it struggle, or even, well, some as Lydia Thorpe and the warriors of the Aboriginal resistance say, it's still a war. It's and talks about that. Well, we're not even, what is it? Australia is actually illegitimate in a lot of their eyes.
Yeah, and look, whether you read the one page or the 26 pages, which I don't get hung up in that, but by the way, simply because just that one page alone, and plus all the commentary around it by the architects, we can see very clearly that this has a flavour of us them. And I've been talking about this for at least 2.5 decades now, nearly 3 decades, that these programs that are founded on this paradigm of separatism, us them, that Indigenous people are fundamentally different to non-Indigenous people, while it might line the pockets of a few leaders, it really does very little to help reconciliation and help Indigenous people themselves. I'm not saying we need to homogenise all of Australia and not recognise culture and that sort of thing, but the starting point must be to recognise the commonalities between a non-Indigenous and Indigenous Australians far outweigh any differences. And when that's the starting point, when that's the foundation, you're going to have more success. With The Voice, like so many other programs before it, it just embraces that paradigm of us, them, Indigenous are separate to non-Indigenous, and therefore it's not going to be successful. Having said that, I mean, yes, may get over the line, but the outcomes it hopes to achieve won't get up.
Well, you identify as part Aboriginal Australian because you are mixed race, and
Yep, and I mean that's the end of the story. Yeah, I am. So continue on.
But we have this, and a lot of the radical activists, they identify mainly with their Aboriginal ancestry and spout all the grievance, even though they are part white or have other ethnicities in them themselves.
Yeah, and they have to carry on like that because you wouldn't know that they had Aboriginal ancestry if they didn't. So it's their way of saying, notice me, notice me, notice me. I'm a victim. You're guilty.
And now I mentioned these radical groups like the warriors of the Aboriginal resistance. We saw this week through that video that mentioned Lydia Thorpe by a Nazi calling himself a member of the Warriors of the Convict Resistance. I'm not sure if you've seen the full video, but it is very racist against Aboriginal Australians. But the way that I've seen it, given that there is this extreme sovereignty was never ceded, always was, it's still a war, and that the white people have genocided, oppressed us, then it's not surprising. Not that I'm saying that I approve. There is this equal reaction on the other side that's saying, yeah, we conquered you, and we're proud of that.
Yeah, of course, extremists attract extremists. Idiots attract idiots. So, I'm not justifying it for 1 second at all. But unfortunately, in both the yes and, if we look at this through the lens of the referendum, if you like, the Uluru Statement, where we've got yes and no people, there's plenty of good people on both sides, but there is that sort of fringe element of idiots in each camp. And those fringe really don't represent the bulk of the people in those camps.
Well, I know that Lydia Thorpe, she's still a progressive no, as she calls it, but I have noticed that there's been a few who were progressive no's, such as Lydia Thorpe's sister and Tarneen Onus Brown, who used to be Tarneen Onus Williams. They've basically switched because they don't want to be voting on the same side as Nazis. And this is sort of the, you could call it some of the gaslighting of the Yes campaign. Vote yes, so you're not on the side of Nazis. So you're not seen as a racist or a far-right extremist.
Yeah, that's poor form. It's a shame that it's come to that. And, you could look at that, and I haven't wasted too much time, but you could look at the Yes camp and find extremist idiots that attach themselves to the Yes camp as well. And I'm not going to smear the whole Yes camp because of those extremist idiots. And I think the Yes camp have enough flaws in their arguments that's where we should be focusing on.
Oh, another tactic of the Albanese government has been, and it's really backfired on them. They've tried to sort of have this as this is what we're going to champion, and we wanted to beat the coalition, and it seems to have backfired on them. But another tactic has been if you're voting no, make sure that you have all of the facts. Don't call for disinformation. They've really tried to. Well, they want their facts.
Their version, yeah. If you don't know, come and see us, and we'll give you a version of the facts. So yeah, that's one thing that they've tried on. I would encourage those. If you don't know, listen to both sides of the argument and draw your own opinion from that, your own conclusion from that.
Listen to people such as yourself, for
example. I
Yeah,
offer opinions, and I'm happy for those opinions to be scrutinised and criticised. So if you have a problem with it, please come back to me and tell me where you think I've gone wrong.
And you've written extensively on The Voice. Obviously, you, in your academic career, have also written about real ways to close the gap. But this is a free, non-paywalled article of yours at news.com.au, myth about Indigenous people that needs to change amid the voice to Parliament.
Yeah. So yeah, that is a good one in the sense that it's not behind a paywall. Others I've got in other papers where, rightly or wrongly, these papers choose to make you pay in order to see them. But, I can summarise my main arguments as to why I'm voting no as we go through this interview.
And well, you provide on your Twitter account some screenshots of your articles, and I've got some of your quotes here. So to close the gap, we're going to have to have some tough conversations. And Jacinta Price, she started one of those tough conversations with her, I think it'll be iconic National Press Club address.
Yeah, absolutely. And others have done it before her. She's just been able to bring it into sharp focus, given that the nation's attention is on Indigenous issues at the moment. And, the tough conversations which her and I and her mother and other like-minded people have been having for years, and, such as violence, which is obviously a very sensitive one and personal one for Jacinta. So, dealing with violence in remote communities, ensuring that children have, live in safe homes and go to good schools and that sort of thing. They're sorts of things we don't want to talk about, and they do need to be spoken about. And, I guess what makes it really a tough conversation when it comes to violence, for example, is we don't like to talk about the perpetrators, and we know who the perpetrators are most often.
Another one of your quotes that you've put up is that there's this gap between the romance view of the Aborigine practicing their culture and how most Australians and with Aboriginal ancestry live their lives. And this is what Jacinta spoke about. We're taught when we're younger, like in the school system, this romantic version of how the ancient Aboriginals lived and how they live in remote communities, that it's all dot paintings, didgeridoos, smoking ceremonies. And it is confronting, and also people don't want to be called racist, that there is this violence, and these also, as Jacinta said, these arranged marriages, polygamy, which is part of ancient traditional Aboriginal culture. Jacinta said it's not the fault of the white culture that in these remote areas Aboriginal Australians live in this way. It's their own culture, and that's what needs to change.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And perhaps gatekeepers wanting to not do anything about it, allow it to continue. And just going back to this whole what I would call fabricated culture today. Bess, her mother, Jacinta's mother, Bess calls, a lot of what we see today is a Disneyland culture, where, people just claim to have this, because they have Aboriginal ancestry, they believe they are culturally different to the mainstream Aussie and have this culture, which amounts to, they may say some things differently and claim to be affected differently, and that, but Bess just calls it a Disneyland culture. And look, where there are true cultural differences, yes, let's consider those and see if they are a barrier to accessing services and that sort of thing. For those people who want to, I'll be condemned for this, but if those who want to play the part of Aborigine in festivities and boardrooms and that sort of thing, that's fine if you want to do that. But let's turn our focus to who are those Indigenous Australians who most need help.
Well, it's not you. It's not Marsha Langton or Thomas Mayo.
No.
It is those living in those remote, and they literally are remote communities. And another tough conversation is whether, because it's the Australian government taxpayer that funds these, we need to have the conversation: is it worth having these places where there is not much hope and opportunity for those born into them?
Yeah, look, just a quick I'll say a couple of things about those. First of all, I've visited many of those places and I've gone there to help communities. But people like Jacinta and her parents, they deal with those people regularly. And what a lot of people don't realise is Jacinta and her family have, nursed more battered bodies and, wounds and cuts of Indigenous people from those camps and communities who are their relatives than what her critics have had warm breakfasts, So behind all the scenes, Jacinta's led a life where her parents have modelled good behaviour, where they've been constantly helping Aboriginal people from these communities and camps who have real needs. They're hungry or they've been wounded and cut, that sort of thing. So credit to Jacinta and her family for doing that and not boasting about it either. Now, coming back to dealing with those communities, just very quickly, I summarise it this way. If you can start a business up in those communities and get commerce happening and services and employment and that sort of thing, great. I'm all for government investing a few million, even billion in getting those communities sustainable, up and running. Now, I feel there are some communities or small places where it's not viable. Someone like Warren Mundine, who is a bit more experienced than me, has said he's very optimistic. He believes everywhere he's been, he said these places have potential. So I'm happy to be guided by Warren's experience there. However, I would just say, for those which may not be sustainable, in my opinion, you need to have a sensitive exit strategy for them. So I'm not just saying you just pull the people and you dump them in a city. You may have to move them to a hub setting where there's still some semblance of, bush and traditional ways and that sort of thing. But we can't, in those places, unless you can get the economy up and running, like Warren thinks can happen in every community, we can't just leave them there to keep doing the same things where they're just earning welfare money sitting there, not engaging in meaningful activity and that sort of thing. And I'm not criticising the people themselves. I guess I'm critical of the bigger system that has allowed that situation to go on.
Actually, here's a real life example. The now retired Essendon footballer Anthony McDonald Tippin Woody. He saw that there's not much opportunity for me here, and so he allowed himself to be adopted by a white social worker. He wanted to leave and have an opportunity. That's an inspirational story, and he was beloved by the Essendon faithful. You want other Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders to be able to have the resources to want a life like he got for himself.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and just summarising, those Aboriginal people who have made it, who are doing well, and when I say made, I mean just living a good life, having the opportunities which you and I take for granted. They know where the next meal's coming from. They live in a safe environment. They've got plenty of opportunities for recreation and socialising and that sort of thing. They've got there through one of two means. They were either born into those circumstances like I was, and I was very lucky. I was born into, two great extended families. In my immediate family, had all the essential needs met. Then you have some people who were not born into good circumstances, like Best Price, for example, who, were able to escape or, transfer out of those situations without losing her cultural roots. You also have people like my father and say Warren Mundine, who lived in poverty as kids, but the parents, the elders, had good morals which they instilled in their children. So they may have been living in poverty, but they did not have poverty of character.
Now, there's been a lot of focus, well, particularly earlier this year, on the crime crisis in Alice Springs. We've seen some of the horrific footage that's come from the Action for Alice Twitter X account. The Facebook page got suspended. And one of the hypotheses I have, because there is crimes, violent crimes that are committed by some Aborigines against white people out of race hatred, and I believe that a lot of that has been taught. And we've seen some of this over in the US with the looting by mobs of African Americans because they believe that they're entitled to reparations. I'm interested to hear your point of view. Is this, because this is another thing Jacinta has talked about, if you teach someone that they're a victim and that there's no hope for them and that it's these wicked people's faults, then they're going to take vengeance in the form of crime in those ways.
Yeah, look, if more generally, as I've been saying for many, many years, if you teach Indigenous people that they are victims of colonisation, white people, that sort of thing, don't be surprised if they are not so pleasant, or look for opportunities to rebel against anything that has anything to do with white, whether it be authority, or, just towns and suburbs and that sort of thing. Having said that, I like to think it's a small minority of Indigenous people engaging in such behaviour. And I think there's also a few factors that flow for that to happen. Yes, it's the poisonous messages they receive where they're told that white is oppressive and that sort of thing. But also, a lot of boredom, and I'm not trying to justify bad behaviour, but certainly boredom is an element there as well too. So,
and now, as that we've had more polls that have just come out in the last few days, there's this focal data poll which points to an overwhelming no vote, and there has been another resolve poll tonight. Now, I'm not sure. There's also been these people saying that, well, if yes wins, it's because it's been rigged by the AEC. We had the debate with the ticks and crosses. I don't know if you have an opinion on any of that. We've had the yes campaign there, purple signage outside looking like the AEC one. There does seem to be a bit of trickery going on.
Well, there is that, but more than just trickery. I've always said, because I get asked, do you think the Voice will win or lose? I say, I don't know. However, if it does win, it will win on emotion, because humans, we are emotional creatures, and something like this really plays into the hands of the emotional of people who are driven by the emotions. And I've, over the months, I've spoken to friends of mine, good friends who, despite we might sit on opposite sides of the political divide, we've maintained good friendships. But I've just seen a few of them just, they haven't used their heads. They've just used their emotions, where they just think, well, I want to end the disadvantage, so that's why I'm voting for the Voice. And to me, that's just such a very limited, empty argument, particularly given that the leaders of the architects of the Voice haven't been able to tell us how this Voice will address the disadvantage. We're just told, oh, well, it's there in the Carmel Langton report. So people are just thinking, with their hearts, their emotions, I want to do good. I want to be a good citizen. I want to be I want to be on the right side of history. I want to make things right. I want reconciliation. So of course I'm going to vote for the Voice. What a beautiful moment this will be. Well, that's very shallow thinking. And, despite what the polls say, I hate to say it, that could be enough to get it over the line. I hope not, but it could be.
Well, the vibe, the good feels, that was basically the message of the first yes ad with the John Farnham ad, and where it ends with a white female boomer. Basically, she puts writes the yes in, so she basically vote yes to feel better about yourself if you're a white boomer. And then we've had recently I think the moral blackmail, where vote yes or the little boy is not going to have a good life. And then also talking about the gap, and basically saying if you vote no, then you don't want the gap to be closed. And Anthony Albanese, I'm really worried about what he's been saying, that said, if Australia votes no, we're not going to have a legislated voice. It sounds like basically he's just going to basically, he's got a form of blackmail, basically vote yes or I'm not going to care about this anymore.
It reminds me of that other Indigenous leader / architect, should I say her name, who said she won't be doing any more welcome to countries. I thought, well, does anyone really care about that? Is that a promise?
And that is another what you call fabrication of Aboriginal culture. I mean, it's been a tradition of the last 10 years at every sporting event, but you and I both well know it started with Ernie Dingo as a tourism gimmick in the 70s.
Yeah. And look, you can always go back further and find sort of something and use your imagination and say, well, this is just an evolution of that. It has been passed down. Well, not really. It's what we see today seems, would be a lot different to what would have been done traditionally. But anyway, that's an aside.
And we also had that condescending ad by Andrew Briggs, which you encountered him at an airport one time. I'm not sure if you want to relay that story for our viewers.
Oh, I can. Oh, well, just very quickly. And by the way, I'm always open to chatting with him. I wouldn't mind having a Coke with him if he could be mature enough to do it. I'm just sitting there. I had no idea who it was. He just comes up to me, you F and C, you cheeky C, and walks off and denied that he did it. Yeah. Not knowing who he was, in an airport, I thought he could be a dangerous person. So I let the lady on the front desk, and only the lady on the front desk, know. And he claimed security involved. At no time was security ever involved. So.
And he spouts the victim and the evil white oppressor narrative, even though he's both had a career as a singer or rapper, and comedian as well.
Yeah, and that would, if I had a chance to chat with him, that would probably be the one thing I'd want to chat with him the most about. And many people who are, not all, but many who build their whole identity around being Indigenous. I'm a proud Gunji man or whatever. Buy into or get some leverage from the victim aspect part of it. It just seems silly when you see that they're hardly victims at all. Or they are victims only of their poor opinion of themselves. They're not victims of colonisation.
Oh, well, we heard from Ray Martin this week, who found out later in life he's 1/16th Aboriginal. He is calling the slogan, "If you don't know, vote no," for ignorant dickheads and dinosaurs, which was another charming remark. He's also on, after the Voice finale on Channel 7, there's the Voice Spotlight debate. He's going to be with Lydia Thorpe, Marilyn Jimmer McCarthy, and Jacinta Price. So he's 1/16th, yet later in life, that's been a lot of what he's put forward as his most important identity.
Look, he's not alone in doing that, and it's a topic issue which you just can't win that discussion. So, if you've got 100th Indigenous ancestry, I don't care. I'd rather, I want to hear the substance of your argument, not your credential of Indigenous ancestry. Just quickly can I spend a minute talking about Ray Martin?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Now, I looked at the transcript, and I think what may have happened with him, I don't think it was outright he was calling, even though it's been portrayed this way by some of my buddies, and that he was calling people D&D. It seems that he found fault with the slogan, "If you don't know, vote no." Okay,
which is not an official Yes campaign slogan. It's no to division.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's one that's used by the No camp. You said it's not an official Yes.
Not an official, not like the shirts have no to division. Not if you don't know, vote no.
Yeah, but that cliche of if you don't, it's certainly been thrown around by a lot of people in the No camp, and it does have some good sense in it. To me, it just says if you don't know, it's because the Yes camp have not done a good job of selling the yes case, so therefore vote no. So it makes perfect sense. But I could also see where Ray was coming from. He was saying, well, if you don't know, go and find out. That sort of thing. For those people who don't know much about the argument, they should be treated with respect and be given the opportunity to do some investigation for themselves.
But you can't find, on the flip side, you can't find out what you haven't been told. And Anthony Albanese has said, we'll work out how the voice will work after the vote.
For sure. Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
And so that is a legitimate argument, that how can we vote when, well, we don't know, like, it's going to be sorted out later.
Yeah, well, and I think that was the whole point of the original, if you don't know, vote no, because if we don't know, it's because despite having some yes champions out there, the architects and Albanese, they have not been able to explain how it's going to help Aboriginal people.
Now, we've talked about the polls. I'm pretty confident that no will win convincingly. In my opinion, that should spell the beginning of the end for what's called the Aboriginal industry, or one of our other writers, Philippi Armstrong, calls it the Aboriginal superstructure. Yeah. We should stop listening to those who have dominated the discussion, such as Marsha Langton and Noel Pearson, and there should be the opportunity for more for other young Indigenous or mixed Indigenous Australians as to come forward and offer more practical solutions that you and Jacinta and Warren have advocated for. I might be optimistic that it might be the end for them, but what are your thoughts?
Okay, well, two things. I'm like a friend of mine said, I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm not as optimistic as you. I don't pay that much attention to the polls. And as I was saying before, gosh, don't underestimate the gullibility of some of the Australian public. Like I said, I have friends who are intelligent people, yet in their minds, we've got to vote for the voice because we've got all this disadvantage facing Indigenous people. Not a good argument, but nonetheless, there are a lot of people who buy into it. So I'm not that confident with the polls. The second thing, will it be the end? I don't think so. I think they will just find another project, another angle, another silver bullet, because what I've been saying is the whole push for the voice is based on the separatist paradigm. That is, your needs are different to my needs, Tim. You've got different sets of needs to what I've got. And if I have a problem, only another Indigenous person can really help me with that problem. You can't help me with that problem because you're not Indigenous, so you can't understand, all that sort of absolute nonsense.
Yes.
That's been around for a long time, okay? Back when I was a public servant in Queensland Health, that was, very prevalent. And I've just seen it over the years in one way or another. There's just been this push, through having different Indigenous advisory bodies, different programs, different tactics, different strategies, that Indigenous people are separate to non-Indigenous people and they know what's best for Indigenous people. So, and the voice just happens to be the latest manifestation of that. You could probably call it the granddaddy of it, or, the separatism on steroids. So if it falls over, well, I'm sure Mr. Albanese will be praised for trying. And I don't think it'll be the end of him. He'll be seen as, well, you tried so hard, blah, blah, blah.
No.
Yeah. And yes, the activists, they'll be just looking for something else. But you can still be absolutely certain that spirit of separatism, that is, only Indigenous people can really understand Indigenous people, will still be there, making trouble.
We should point out that Indigenous Australians already have a voice through these various government bodies. I don't know what the difference between a land council and a land corporation is, and what the Council of Peaks is, and all of these. There's so many. I'm not sure
Yeah,
if you
exactly. And I tweeted before. What's the counterpart of the non-Indigenous counterpart of the Indigenous voice? There isn't one. You don't have a non-Indigenous voice. You have politicians and leaders and that sort of thing, and they are there for all people. Okay, so this voice is it's a separate thing for Indigenous people. And by the way, I don't have a huge problem with having some advisory bodies and that sort of thing, lending a helping hand to Indigenous people who are particularly disadvantaged. So I'm not saying let's abolish every Indigenous department and that sort of thing, because some of them do play a valuable role in society. But I'm just saying the overarching paradigm of separatism is just creating problems for Indigenous people, and we don't need another superstructure, which would be the voice, in addition to those bodies you mentioned a couple of moments ago, which included the body of peaks.
Those are just the ones I've mentioned off the top of my head.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've already got those. Why do we need another super one? Again, if the architects or Mr. Albanese were able to give me a good reason, I would probably consider voting yes. But at this stage, I haven't heard a good reason.
And obviously all of these bodies, I mean, billions is spent each year, and we're not seeing the gap being closed. I mean, one of the good things about Peter Dutton in taking a stand against the voice is he won't be, and Jacinta Price, the Shadow Indigenous Affairs spokeswoman, is having an audit of these bodies. People have been asking Noel Pearson, where has the $550 million that is being invested in your various Cape York groups?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was reading somewhere where Jacinta was opposed on the grounds that these audits have already been done. Well, I haven't seen them. That's not to say they're not out there. So if they're out there, they need to be made very, very public. So until then, I would back Jacinta in, and I think that's probably been one of her best, most valuable claims, and I hope it's the one she sticks with most, that we do need a very transparent, professionally done audit on just where the money's going and how it's spent and that sort of thing. Just see what can be saved.
Now, what do you think of Peter Dutton's idea to have just a referendum on sole constitutional recognition? Because in my opinion, the High Court could still interpret that in ways that is unforeseen.
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't think it was the right time for him to mention it, okay, because you just had people like Marcia jump onto it and have a bit of fun with it. And look, maybe he wasn't pushing it that much, and maybe the media sort of accelerated it. But I just don't think it's something that he should be discussing now. Leave it for another time. Wait till the dust settles on the referendum if it does fail. But look, I'm not as cautious as you that it's something that will lend itself to being misused in a legal sense. I think a lot of people would be happy if there was a recognition in just a simple statement of fact that Indigenous people were here before the Europeans. Something as simple as that. Now I could be wrong.
Well, it would be ideal, but our High Court has been shown it's been unpredictable with its decisions over the years.
Well, okay. Well, look, I'm not a legal eagle, so I don't.
Well, me either.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
and this is why a lot of people are voting no. Like I was at a party the other week. This is just the voice came up, and one person said, "Well, how do I know if the voice gets up? They're not going to, be able to legally the local tribe take ownership of my home." Now that's obviously there would be a lot of people who'd say that's misinformation, but that is what some people are worried about a Pantora's legal box.
Oh, look, and for those who are worried, I would say don't worry about that at this stage. It's just not a good. What some people don't get. I'll say this here now. When you put forth those arguments, you're going to turn a lot of people off voting. Though you'll be seen as a
Somebody
scaremonger
who's
and that sort of thing.
not engaged in politics. It's just like,
Yeah.
I didn't say anything. It was just something that they said.
Sure,
And,
but yeah.
And they are not a right winger or anything like that.
Yeah. Okay. Look, some people say that. To them, I would say, look, that's certainly the least of your worries for now.
Well, I've appreciated you giving me your time tonight, Anthony. I can see how exhausted you are. This referendum campaign has taken its toll. I haven't taken any of it personally, but I just know hopefully on October 15th, regardless of the result, you can have a well-earned rest, because you've really over the years really put your neck out. And
yeah.
Like, I know that Lydia Thorpe this week has carried on about the alleged threats and abuse that she's got, but you've got your fair share of that over the years as well.
Yeah, and that's part of the job. And I wouldn't have it as much as, say, Warren and Jacinta, so they're very much on the front line. But what I can say is, yes, I cop a lot of abuse. However, I cop far more praise from people who support me, and that just means so much to me. So for everyone who has just sent me a nice letter, liked something I've done on Twitter, that sort of praise just cancels out any criticism I've ever received. So I just want the people to know who have praised me and backed me. It means so much to me, as I'm sure it means a lot to Jacinta and Warren as well.
Oh well, that's I'm certainly in that camp as well.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, just being asked to be on a show like this again just means so much to me to get invited. And you say, look, Anthony, I want to hear what you've got to say. I don't take it for granted, and I do see it as an absolute privilege. So thank you very much for that, Tim.
And we'll obviously be tuning in later on to see what that voice debate is. And yeah, we neither of us will know until the night. So
yeah, can I just say one final thing? I see the Australian have got something coming out. It might be tomorrow, where I think they've already shown a preview of it once, where it's just an 8-minute clip of myself and a few others for and against the voice. And that was a well put together little promo expose on the voice. So hopefully it'll be not just available on the Australian website, but other places as well. Just 8 minutes from what I can remember, where you got this assortment of voices giving their views on the voice.
I'm just putting up some of the comments praising you as well. So it's my audience has thoroughly enjoyed hearing from you.
Right. Okay. Well, again, it's been good to be with you again, Tim. And maybe we can do something after referendum.
Yes, we shall see what the aftermath is. Well, I sort of know how the ABC and that will spin it, but I certainly think that there's well, I'm very optimistic there'll be a no vote. I think there is opportunity to have a proper way forward on this issue between closing the gap, we should say, between remote Australians living in remote Australians and Australians living in other parts of Australia. I mean, that's how we should sort of see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, when it comes to Indigenous people, like I've said for a couple of decades, the gap we need to close is the gap between those disadvantaged Indigenous people and those Indigenous people like myself, the architects, who are leading a pretty good life.
Well, take care, Anthony, and thank you once again for your time.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, that's a WilmsFront for this week. Now, I have got other WilmsFront guests lined up in the coming days and weeks. So I will post those when they are confirmed. Now, of course, we have Tim's News Explosion tomorrow night at the usual time, 9 p.m. Melbourne time on the WilmsFront channels. So there'll be a lot to cover as well, and including the just emerged war between Israel and Hamas. There's a lot to cover. And obviously in the final week, we'll have a lot of voice coverage, the theorists on Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Melbourne time. And then, of course, the Trad Tasman Talk Super Saturday stream starting 5 p.m. Melbourne time on the Unshackled and Right Minds YouTube channel. So we'll be covering both the voice referendum results and the New Zealand general election results. So that will be with anchored by myself, Dewey DeBoer, and Stephen Berry, with a panel throughout the night analysing the results. And of course, keep checking out the Unshackled.net for our Unshackled Productions archive and commentary as well. So thank you for joining me on this earlier time tonight, and I'll see you all tomorrow night. Good night, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com to view the archive of episodes, and keep visiting the Unshackled.net to view all our shows, and to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.